You know what I find super sexy? Podcast ROI. I know there are few things less creatively stimulating than the term ROI. It sounds like something on a spreadsheet or a quarterly report or something someone in finance says about 17 times before you drift off to sleep. And yet, ROI is exactly what has been keeping me coming back, even when it's feeling like a lot to sit here, record, book the guests, promote the thing, you know, everything that goes with making a podcast. It's not like I've suddenly become a numbers person, but I've started to understand that return on investment can mean more than just straight math. And yes, I have talked the talk right here on this show with podcasters who have made a very literal business out of their podcasts in the form of direct revenue brought by sponsors and advertisers. Shout out Katie Fogarty and Ali Prado. If you haven't seen my episodes with them, go back to your feed and check them out. I think there's a lot there for you. What they have created in terms of monetized podcasts that return actual green dollars is nothing to sneeze at. And while ROI in terms of direct revenue is at best for me a tertiary priority, given what I've heard from these peers, it might not be totally out of the realm of possibility for me or for you. Sponsors, you know where to find me. But seriously, folks, if you're in podcasting and maybe you're losing steam or you're considering entering podcasting and can't quite wrap your head around why it would be worth your time and energy and the money you'd invest into microphones or working with a professional, scooch on in. I have some things that might shift your perspective on what a show that earns its keep looks and sounds like. It might just become one of the most valuable things you create. It certainly has been for me. Don't tell my kids. When most people think about ROI in podcasting, though, they do default to the money thing. You know, what CPM are you getting for your host read ads? And if that sounds like a mouthful of jargon, it is, and we can set it aside for now. But sponsorships, ad revenue, how long until this thing pays for itself, those are all legitimate concerns and considerations. But that is a wildly incomplete list of ways in which a podcast can pay for itself. If money is the only return you're measuring, you're going to miss the majority of what podcasting is actually doing for you. Podcasting, when done right, gives back exponentially more than it takes. And I'm telling you, as someone who's been occasionally banging her head on the desk, wondering what the heck I've gotten myself into here, if you widen the lens on what return actually means, you'll see that it's all worth it. The most important and one of the most overlooked forms of ROI in podcasting boils down to one word: relationships. Allow me to introduce you to a distinctly podcast native phenomenon. It's something I like to call the intimacy effect, also known as the podcast generated parasocial relationships that have been the subject of much scientific research, including at least 2 doctoral theses, according to my recent rabbit holes on the subject. Podcasts have a special, scientifically based magic to them in terms of the relationships they create, both inside and outside of the podcast episode. The intimacy of both the experience of listening to a podcast between you and me riffing, hi, me, the podcast host, that is, and the relationships that are built out of the conversations that I have in interview episodes. You feel like you're essentially a fly on the wall or the more quiet participant in that conversation. Whatever the case, podcasts build a parasocial relationship between the host and the listener, and a real social relationship between the host and the guest. One of my guests recently shared on my show that when she went to see a talk given by podcast powerhouse Scott Galloway, aka Professor G, co-host with Kara Swisher on Pivot, he shared that he does have a lot of followers, but the ones who greet him the most warmly and enthusiastically are inevitably the podcast listeners. The secret sauce of a podcast when it comes to building an audience and a following is known as the parasocial relationship. And you'll hear from me a lot on that. Just needed to drive home how podcasts differ from, say, a newsletter, a social media post, any sort of medium that is less three-dimensional feeling than a podcast. Okay. Now that we have this understanding of the parasocial relationship that is very endemic to the podcast out of the way, let's talk about the most valuable categories of ROI outside of the monetary type of ROI. First, the relationship that is created as a result of you, the podcast host, inviting someone onto your show that you may not have a pre existing relationship with. The podcast invite itself is the first step in creating a very special kind of relationship with someone who may be far more accomplished than you in your industry and you'd like to learn from, or someone who you'd like to borrow what I call OPP, other people's platforms. They have a lot more influence and a lot more following that you would like to tap into and expose your thought leadership to. These relationships begin to build the moment that you say the words, "Would you like to be on my podcast?" They are magic words to any thought leader or industry mover or shaker or hopeful industry mover. Even just the invitation itself is the beginning of such a meaningful relationship. It's a ultimate leveling of the playing field. You have a platform that you are inviting someone onto. Everybody loves an invitation, and you're inviting them to share their thought leadership with your following, however small it may be. There is just inherent flattery in inviting someone to come speak about themselves on your platform. I am hard pressed to find an equivalent relationship builder of this kind. You could slide into the DMs of someone and fangirl out about their work, but the exchange of value that is implicit in an invitation to be on a podcast is really unmatched. And the podcast interview, the people that you get to sit down with, shut out the world, and talk about what matters to you and to them. A deep conversation between two people about the expertise of two people. They then become part of your orbit. They become collaborators, clients, friends, business partners, people that would have been otherwise out of reach to you without the container of a podcast. The second category of ROI is the opportunities that begin to find you. This is something I've been tooting the horn of to my clients and the people in my accelerator community until my face turns blue. I can't tell you the number of invites to be on other podcasts that have flooded into my inbox since launching this podcast. It feels a little magical and hard to believe, but when you're consistently learning in public, having conversations in public, people begin to associate you with a space, a curiosity that they want to become part of, and a way of thinking. The podcast shows a side of you that just doesn't come out in your LinkedIn posts, your newsletter. Those little pixels on a page just cannot compare to the human voice. It's a fact. Another form of ROI, you're creating something. It's not a book you can use to prop a door open, but it is an artifact that will, I'm sorry to get dark, outlive you. It's something that captures the true essence of you, your voice, your mispronunciations, your quirky analogies, the poop jokes, if you know, you know. This is a legit body of work that did not exist until you sat down in front of a mic, either by yourself like I am right now, or with someone across the virtual table from you, creating new ideas, new perspectives, new insights, and sharing it with the world. You're building essentially an archive of how you think and how the people in your orbit think. Episode by episode, you're creating proof of perspective. And that compounds when you bring other people into it by sharing it and putting out there in the world. Minus the style and cadence of the ChatGPT writing that is quietly flooding your feeds with M dashes and "it's not this, it's that" sentence structure and this, and that sentence fragments. But I digress again. And this is the form of ROI that's been hitting me most lately. Connection to the people that you have reached through your podcast. Literally the day after I launched my podcast, somebody wrote me saying, "I loved it. I listened to all the first 3 episodes in one day." And then the next day I got another email saying, "You're talking about things I've been wondering about and needing answers for." It just money cannot buy that feeling. Sure, money's nice. Again, sponsors, you know where to find me. But knowing that not only had my message been received, it had been received in the exact way I intended it to by the exact people I had intended to receive it. People said things like, it made me feel less alone in the thing that I'm butting my head against. And wait, I thought I was the only one who felt this way. And that, my friends, that is ROI. And this is where I want you to lean in just a little bit. That didn't happen by accident. That feedback and that reassurance and that ROI that I got from my listeners happened because I asked for it. At the end of my episodes, I told people, email me, tell me what's on your mind, tell me if you agreed, if you disagreed, and they did. It sounds obvious, but it's actually where a lot of podcasts fall apart from an ROI perspective, because if you don't define the return you want, both for yourself and from your listeners, you can't design for it. And if you don't design for it, you won't get it. This is where ROI stops being the abstract, unsexy acronym, and it starts becoming something you can actually engineer. I talk about this a lot inside my podcast accelerator. The question I always ask them to ask themselves is, what does this podcast need to return for you in order to be worth it? And by it, I mean, again, the energy, the time, doing this instead of something else. You need to very clearly articulate, this is what I want to see from my podcast. Concretely, is it 5 meaningful emails per episode, 3 qualified inbound leads per season, 1 strategic relationship per month, speaking invitations that come from your podcast? Once you start to say that to yourself, you can start to create your, get ready for another unsexy acronym, KPIs. Yes, KPI, guys. It's something I learned in the corporate world and hated it when I was there, but key performance indicator is something that will keep you going and will keep you knowing if you are resonating with your audience, if you are meeting your goals. This is where you need another acronym, a CTA, a call to action. You actually do need to tell your listener what action you want them to take as a result of having listened to your podcast. And that's you've seen it on YouTube and you've heard it in the podcast, follow us wherever you get your podcasts, like and subscribe, all of that stuff. Why do those people keep saying it? Because it works. There's somebody I'm going to work with as a result of her saying on her podcast in a CTA at the end of her episode, hey, you want to work together? Go to my website, set up a meeting. It was over the course of several episodes that I developed trust in her and knew that she was somebody that I could see myself working with. Had I not heard that out of her mouth, it was what led me to set that meeting with her. And she's going to get some money from me because of this. So yes, you have to say literally, hey, send me an email, tell me what you think, or go to my website, get on the wait list for my podcast accelerator. Because by the time someone is at the end of your episode, you have earned their trust and they're wondering what they should do with it. They're in a relationship with you at that point, and you've given them one action, and you have to be very clear on that one action. You can't load up the end of your episode with follow us, like us, send us an email, go to our website, get my lead magnet. This is the one thing. And you can change it up every episode, but one thing at a time. The human brain is a chaotic place, so make the path for your listener to give you that KPI very clear and very simple. When you've done that, your podcast stops being a piece of content and starts becoming a system that returns value to you. I promise you. And that's the whole point, because you're making something that requires a lot from you. And if it doesn't give something back relative to what it takes from you, it won't sustain itself. It will not earn its keep. If you're in the middle of your podcast or thinking about it and you're not totally sure what it needs to give back in order to earn its keep, that's the right question. And I'm glad you're actually wrestling with it, because what happens so often is there's not really any wrestling at all before people start a podcast. There's really no forethought. People just say, I should have a podcast because I'm just the wittiest person in the room, or I make people laugh, or I have observations that they've never heard anyone else make before. Those are all great reasons to have a podcast. Honestly, humor is one that new podcasters often overlook. And you should, even if you aren't creating a comedy podcast, bring that to your podcast. But that alone is not going to carry you over the long haul. it alone is not going to deliver ROI. What will is when that poop joke that you made landed with the kind of person who's in your ideal audience profile, right? I'm making this podcast for people who may be disenchanted about the idea of their podcast or a podcast they'd like to make, confused about whether podcasting is worth the effort. Those are the exact people I've heard from, and they've said, I'm going to keep going. You made me feel like it's worth it. And that is ROI. For me, big time, because I said, when I set out to make this podcast, a key performance indicator for me was I receive an email and it indicates to me that I am resonating with someone and my message has gotten through to them. I want to reach people who are in danger of pod fade or not sure if they should make a podcast, but they have a great idea. They have a great sense of humor. They don't know where to begin. That was a KPI for me and I hit it. And so I kept going. If you're building a podcast as a thought leader, a founder, someone with a mission or a message, this is the kind of ROI that moves your business forward. It means you are in the ears of the people you want to work with and want to influence, the people that need to hear your message and want it and are craving it. People don't buy from content. They move toward the people they feel connected to, that they trust, that they feel they know because they're hearing that person's voice, possibly even over the course of 3 episodes in one day. Creating that kind of connection at scale, as people who use the word ROI all the time like to say, will take time. To me, as someone I recently spoke to said, I would rather be famous in one zip code than nobody across the globe. That is nailing it with a niche podcast. I feel kind of famous in my little podcasting zip code lately, and it's because of you. It's because you have reached out to tell me how this is landing with you, and I really could not thank you enough. If you are struggling to find what ROI looks like for you, you are in luck. I have something I call the podcast clarity diagnostic. And part of that is nailing down the ROI that will make everything that goes into creating and growing a podcast worth all of that effort. So please drop me an email at Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. That is Courtney@soundsgreatstrategy.com. I would love to hear from you, and I am here to help you understand why ROI is actually kind of sexy, and there's a reason ROI is how you spell king in French. A podcast that earns its keep, that's the king of all possible outcomes. This has been Talking the Talk with Courtney Reimer, talking about the sexiness of ROI. Thanks for listening. Thanks for creating. Keep doing both.